Ask Dan Schneider. This latest Ask Dan Schneider has me answering a question that I have been asked many times before, the latest from someone named Neil Habershaw just a couple of weeks ago. And that question basically is, what do I think of Dan Schneider, the television maven? Well, I first heard of Dan Schneider, the big fat guy on the Head of the Class TV show in the mid 1980s. I think that's when everyone first heard of him. Then I guess he was off the air for about 10, 12 years or something, and people mostly forgot about him. Then I guess in the mid 90s, he started putting out these really brain dead children's comedies, sitcoms, ones that I consider at a sub 1970s, 80s syndicated sitcom level. I remember shows from the 1980s about a little girl who was a robot, and I think there was something called Harry and the Hendersons. Just terrible shows, and the clips I've seen on YouTube are the same. I do have. I was once emailed by the fat Dan Schneider, and he's a year younger, a lot fatter, and a lot richer. But I was emailed by him maybe 10, 12 years ago, and it was such a ridiculous email. I have it if you Google, Cosmoetica on the Cosmoetica site, use the Google function, you can find the email. I forget which essay it was in response to. But I put it at the end of an essay as a follow-up, and basically he introduced himself, asked me, to be kind to him. He called himself a writer or whatnot. But, I mean, he wrote crap. He wrote one of the worst movies of all time, according to a lot of people, Good Burger. And the thing is, I responded and asked him if he ever got close to any of the girls on that show, and he never wrote back. And I think from that point on, he tried to wipe all Cosmoetica Dan Schneider mentions offline, because back in around 03, 04, I was the most popular Dan Schneider. Or I was vying with a guy named Captain Dan Schneider, who I think on Lake Okeechobee down in Florida. And then there was a Dan Schneider baseball player from the 40s or 50s. And over the years, a few other Dan Schneiders have sprung up, including some bad poet kid and some real estate guys, some business people. But other than the fat Dan Schneider, I'm the most popular Dan Schneider. And I would guess that as the years go on, I will slowly but surely displace the fat man again, just as someone like Aaron Spelling got replaced by other people who had longer standing in the arts. But anyway, that's some experience. I do get embarrassed a little bit. There's an old tale, probably apocryphal, that I was told as a child, and it went like this: that in the early 20th century, there was this German baker out on Long Island who spent many years baking goods that were well loved in a German bakery, and he was well loved. He had made a small fortune, and then one day in the early 1930s, people stopped coming to his bakery, and they stopped coming to his bakery because his name turned out to be Adolf Hitler. And supposedly there were stories of this Adolf Hitler the baker in New York papers of the day. And now he had no relation to the Adolf Hitler who was the Nazi dictator, nor relation to that Hitler family. I'm assuming it's apocryphal because I've looked online and I've never found that story listed even online. That doesn't mean it's not true. But anyway, that's sort of the way I feel. I mean, obviously, fat Dan Schneider, who makes bad sitcoms, isn't as bad a human being as the Adolf Hitler. But his legacy of stupidity and bad art is something that has weighed upon me. And it is a sort of a little tasking, a burden on me. But nonetheless, he's made his money. He'll fade into obscurity. And who knows, maybe he'll get his due, which will be the obliquity and nihility of the future. But anyway, that's all that I have to say on the fat Dan Schneider. And so I will do another Ask Dan Schneider in the near future.